Great. Oops. Um, okay. Welcome everyone. My name is John Parks. I'm with the Colorado Energy Office, and I have my colleague here, Julia Masters from the Department of Local Affairs, Colorado Resiliency Office, and we're here to talk to you about the exciting new grant programs and study we have that we're kicking off due to the grid resiliency funding we received recently, which is part of the infrastructure bill. So I will go ahead and share my screen here, and let's get started. So this is a joint venture from the Colorado Energy Office, Department of Local Affairs, and the Department of Regulatory Agencies. And this is as I said, from the formula funding from section 40101D from the infrastructure bill. So this does not pertain to some of the other competitive grants that we have applied to as a state. And we have not heard about any of those, but we look forward to hearing more about those in the future. All right, let's see. So here's our agenda for today. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the background on electric grid resilience in Colorado, and then we're going to talk about all the neat, exciting programs we have that will be funded by this grant opportunity. Julia will talk about the microgrids for community resilience, which is where the majority of the funding that Colorado received from the Department of Energy will be going towards. And then I will be talking about the grid hardening grants, the advanced grid monitoring grants, as well as the grid resiliency roadmap, otherwise known as the microgrid roadmap. And then we plan to have some time for some questions and answers at the end. And again, this meeting is being recorded, and we plan on posting it on our website so that folks can refer back to this. Also, I just want to mention that this is a follow-up to our last meeting that we had in a similar forum here that was almost 11 months ago, and we know it's been a long slog since from November 17th of 2022 till today, in October 2023. But there was a lot of things that are out of our control, and we're excited to have these opportunities today. So first of all, in terms of the background on electric grid resilience in Colorado, these grant opportunities are really built upon different frameworks that we have in place in Colorado. So first of all, we've got the greenhouse pollution reduction roadmap, which our office is currently working on a 2.0 version. We've got the energy assurance emergency plan, otherwise known as the state energy plan, and the Colorado resiliency framework, which the Colorado Resilience Office is responsible for. And so through this, we are creating the microgrid roadmap that will help guide some of our investments, as well as support initial investments in some solutions to make energy systems resilient while advancing an equitable transition to a low carbon economy. So here's a little overview of our 2-year budget. And we say 2-year budget because this grant opportunity is it's actually 5 years of funding that is flowing from the federal government to the states and tribes. And this year, this tranche of funding, which is about $17 million, represents the first 2 of those 5 years of funding. So we do expect another 3 years of funding, each of which will be approximately half the amount that we are receiving here. And you can see that we've got approximately $10 million that's going into the microgrids program that Julia is going to talk about in just a minute. We've got about approximately $4 million going into the grid hardening grant for small and rural communities, and we've got about $2 million going to advanced grid monitoring, and then we've got this other section that is for our studies and for the administration of the grant. Julia, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Great. Yeah, so this entire budget, we're going to get into more detail around it, especially for the MCR piece. I did just want to point out kind of this red box that we have here is state funding that we have as eligible for construction of new generation. We have some eligibility kind of constraints from the DOE funding. So we've worked around that to be able to still offer grants that will be eligible for constructing new generation. So we will get into that a little bit more. John, if you could go to the next slide. Great. I can take this one. So this is kind of big picture what we're thinking in terms of our timeline. We are, right at the beginning of October. We will have our application windows open for about another 5 or so weeks, 6 weeks. We have purposefully kind of staggered those end dates of the MCR versus grid hardening and advanced grid monitoring in case there are utilities among us that are thinking about applying for more than one grant, trying to make that as kind of flexible for you guys as possible. And we are hoping, and you can see this in our NOFA, that we will be able to deliver award letters or denial letters in February or March of 2024. A lot of this funding requires DOE approval of specific sub-applicant applications. So we are at the kind of the whim of our own internal processes, which will be, very, very clearly outlined in our NOFA of how we're going to be assessing your projects, but it also has to go through a few different ranks of DOE approval before we can get that to you. So we are estimating a February or March return on that. Federal funding has a lot of different requirements, and we are doing our best to be able to give you an expectation of what it's going to look like. Next slide, please. Great. So now we can talk about MCR. Next slide. Great. So just as a little ground setting, I'm sure most of the folks on the call here have been around for our other community engagement or office hours over the last year. I did want to ground set with some existing community-based microgrids here in Colorado. I'm not sure if Pitkin County folks are on the call or San Miguel, but we have 2 examples of in progress or fully built out community-based microgrids. In Pitkin, it involves an airport and transportation authority as kind of a solar-based energy project there. San Miguel, kind of jumping down, it is centered around mission critical loads that can help with communicating out when needed. And then we have a Red Feather Lakes example, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, which was a very collaborative development between local, regional, and national partnerships. So I just wanted to kind of bring those examples in to say that we're in the MCR program really promoting and looking for these community-facing microgrids. And so we also have here kind of a definition of resilience hubs, which is built into a lot of the language that we have in our NOFAs, but thinking about facilities that can help support residents and coordinate services and just be a safe place during or after a natural hazard. And so in kind of bringing that idea of resilience hubs to the front of these conversations, we'll continue to explore what opportunities there are. So next slide, please. Again, just kind of level setting. I'm sure all of you were following the devastation that happened in Maui with the power lines going down and the water systems overwhelmed. And so we kind of saw that that disaster unfolding and saw an opportunity where a lot of that backup infrastructure could have been supportive in terms of grid resilience and emergency communications. So just kind of pulling that example of real world disasters and the aftermath into play, thinking of how microgrids can be supportive through emergency communications, through economic resilience, and of course, grid and infrastructure resilience and reliability. Next slide. In July of this year, we awarded 8 planning grants to utilities around Colorado. I'm sure many of you are aware of that. We have this nice map that shows where each of those potential projects, these are all planning grants, so potential projects will be located. And just kind of calling out 3 of those 3 categories we had on the previous slide, thinking through how those projects fit into those buckets. So for communications, I think I saw Terry on the call. We have San Miguel Power Association that is exploring a project centering around the utilities' critical communications infrastructure. Great. And so while this is not directly community facing, we feel like being able to, get the word out during a disaster or just during a power outage is an incredibly community facing, justification. So we have that as an example. Poudre Valley is exploring building out a microgrid that supports a number of economic businesses in their location, including a fire station and a post office and a CDOT facility. So kind of thinking through that economic lens. And then finally, the City of Delta Municipal Utility is exploring adding combined heat and power generation to support the community's grid in the time of an outage. So kind of 3 examples of how existing MCR grants that we've allocated fit into those buckets. Next slide, please. So I am going to outline the various NOFAs that we've released. They came out on Thursday of last week. We also sent out an email blast. There's a number of different funding streams that we're working with, and I recognize there's going to be potential confusion or maybe frustration with the way that these tranches are being allocated. So please feel free to ask questions. I will do my best to outline them in the simplest way possible. We'll leave some Q&A at the end. So as I kind of mentioned before, the DOE funding we received does not allow for new generation of, for construction of new generation, which is a discrepancy that changed kind of from the time that 40101D was announced to the states until we were awarded that letter. So there's been a lot of scrambling in a lot of different state energy offices trying to figure out how to still support the programs that we would like to support, have been planning on supporting. So one of the ways that we have worked around this is we are kind of flip-flopping some of the funding streams we have into the ways that we can optimize them the best. So I'll start with the House bill dollars. These are the House bill dollars, and this is the middle column that says construction grants. The NOFA is Notice of Funding Opportunity or announcement, I believe. So in these slides, this will all be linked, but they're also on our website right now. So the construction grants, there's this 700,000 bucket left from the state funds that are eligible just for rural and municipal utilities. And these funds are eligible for new generation. So we have kind of grouped this slide we're showing you as funding that is available to either explore projects with new generation or fund construction of new generation. You can see our max award is 94,000 with a 33% match, and that in-kind and admin are eligible as match. So that is our House bill dollars, so state reporting requirements, but as you can see, only a sliver of money that we have available left in that budget for generation. Going over to the next column, this is planning grant funding that comes from the federal funding. So there's 500,000 available. It's kind of the same max award and match requirements as our previous funding round that was just House bill dollars for planning grants. So 36,000 as the max award with a 25% match. And we I'm just seeing a little error on here. There is in-kind and admin eligible for both of these. So that is just needs to be updated in that match requirements box. But essentially, we are trying to, make this money available for you all to be able to explore the projects you want to propose to us, while also taking advantage of this wonderful infusion of federal dollars. So hopefully that was somewhat clear, that we have this planning grant bucket that is federally funded, and then we have this construction bucket that is House bill funded that can fund new generation. So that is one set or two sets of funding opportunities. There are two separate NOFAs available for that. Can you go to the next slide, please, John? And then here is kind of the bulk of the funding we received for from the federal funding that will be going to microgrid. So we have two kind of tracks here. One is available just for rural and municipal utilities, as the other two previous NOFAs I just outlined are. And then one is available to all utilities. So the IOUs in the state are eligible as well. We have about $1 million as the max award, $1 million, and a 1/3 match requirement if the utility is under the threshold of 5 million megawatts per year, which is most of them other than the IOUs. And what the eligible uses of this funding are going to be storage, controllers, potentially replacing existing generation assets with updated generation for weatherization purposes. That is DOE language. That is how it can kind of fit into the eligibility of this funding. So we're kind of thinking as this tranche of funding as the storage and controller piece of the puzzle. I will stop here and say that there is no restriction on how many applications a utility could put in for the MCR application windows right now. You are more than welcome to apply for this federal pocket of money for construction, for a controller or storage. You are more than welcome to apply for the funding that is generation only. There's not a requirement from us that you need to piece together all of it together with these funding opportunities. We are really just trying to get the funding to you in the way that you guys want to access it. So can you go to the next slide, please? And here are just some example uses, and I kind of outlined this on the previous page, but for planning, very much the same as the other funding round, but just establishing the potential for microgrid projects, size, scale, and cost, evaluating existing infrastructure through the resiliency criteria, and then developing recommendations. For the construction and implementation, the bulk of these examples are for the federal funding that does not allow generation. So you can fund energy storage. So there's some examples there: batteries, vehicle to grid battery storage, pumped hydro. A microgrid controller would be eligible. All of the kind of electrical system components like switch gears and inverters. And then again, that language of replacing old generation parts with new generation parts with the specific intention of ensuring weatherization. So again, that is just for the federal funding eligibility. Excuse me. And then you can see in that gray box at the bottom, the state funding, it is eligible to fund new generation. So we're going to do our best to be able to kind of guide applicants through this process, but just trying to make it explicitly clear about what is and isn't eligible with the different funding sources. Next slide, please. This is very similar to the last round of applications that we sought out, but just wanted to overview kind of how we will be assessing these applications you're sending in. So the first bucket is demonstrating greatest community need, benefit, and collaboration. The second is reducing vulnerabilities and increasing reliability. And the third is local commitment and readiness. Next slide. With the greatest community need, here are just some bullets of what we're looking for. The proposed project matches the outcomes, including demonstrations of support from community-based partners, including anchor institutions and local governments, rooting the projects in community-based institutions like that resilience hub concept with so places that can serve multiple purposes. Next slide, please. With the reduction of vulnerabilities and increasing reliability, we have developed the MCR social and climate vulnerabilities mapping tool, which I will show you a screenshot of on the next screen, that will help us and help you demonstrate to us where your vulnerabilities are and how this project will address those and seek to strengthen your resilience. So next slide, please. So here is a screenshot of the mapping tool. Those who have applied are probably familiar with this. We have some thresholds built in as default. So the climate vulnerability flag and the Colorado environmental justice flag, both of these are not required. There are thresholds that we are looking for projects to meet, but they are not required. If your community has not, technically reached that level on the map based on how this is being mapped out, we also have narrative portions for all three of these vulnerability categories in our application so that you all can elaborate more as to why maybe the data is not matching up with your lived experience in your community and why this project would be a real asset to increasing resiliency in your community in these three categories. Next slide. And then finally, just this local commitment and readiness. We are looking for projects that have a higher reliance on non-fossil fuel-based generation. Again, not a requirement. Looking at the utility track record for planning efforts around energy efficiency and incentive programs, demonstrating readiness through financial resources, and then thinking through how this project may or may not align with regional or local plans, hazard mitigation plans, climate action plans that are seeking to address similar concepts. Next slide, please. We will host 3 office hours during this application period, not only just to answer questions, but to overview federal reporting requirements and kind of what will be expected out of some of these projects. So the October 16th date, these links will all be active. They are on our website now, but we will also post these slides and you'll be able to click through here. We'll be focusing on the construction grants on the 16th, the planning grants on the 25th, and then November 1st, we'll just do kind of a general session. So feel free, they're optional. There's no, there's no requirement to join them. But if you have questions or want to talk more, you can join those or reach out directly. Next slide, please. And I thought this was just useful as kind of a wrap up, thinking about examples of other, utility storage programs in other states. I've been learning a lot about the state of microgrids in other places. California has a lot of really active things going on, and one really interesting program they have that the PUC there authorized is this microgrid incentive program with a $200 million budget. The 3 IOUs there have all developed programs to support that mandate. And you can click on those links there, but just really interesting to see how these community-based microgrids are getting continuous funding. And then in Green Mountain Power in Vermont, there's a home battery pilot program that they've had around since 2015. And they have a few different programs that you can see here around leasing batteries, Tesla batteries, or buying your own battery from a local installer and receiving incentives. So just some ways that other utilities in different places are thinking through kind of incentive structures and benefits of these types of projects. Next slide. Great. That is all I have on MCR. I'm sure lots of you have questions or clarification. So please hold your questions until the end, but we will do our best to get to every single one of you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Julia. It's a really neat opportunity there. This microgrids for community resilience, and we're excited to be offering these grant opportunities. Just want to move forward with this, talk about some of these other grant opportunities we have available. And And one thing I should be clear about is that the eligible entities for all of these grants are Colorado's utilities, right? Some of them are restricted to co-ops and munis, and some of them are open to all utilities. So as the owners of those assets, seems like the utilities are the ones who are best in a situation to improve the resilience of our grid. So I'm going to talk about the grid hardening grant, the advanced grid monitoring grant, and the grid resiliency roadmap. So first of all, there's this is just an overview of these three programs that I'll be managing. There's the grid hardening grants for small and remote or rural communities. We've got 4.2 set aside, 4.2 million set aside for this grant opportunity, and the cap on each of those grant applications is $1,059,000. So if we have 4 awardees at that level, there will be 4 grants. We also have a 1.98 million available for the advanced grid monitoring grants, and so just under $500,000 is available is the max for each of those grants, and at that level we'll award 4 grants during this funding cycle. And then there's the grid resiliency or the microgrid roadmap that is being carried out as a result of Colorado House Bill 22-1249. And there is a very important stakeholder engagement session in here, and that will be going November through February, that we would love to have widespread engagement on. So let's go into detail about each of these. First of all, there's the rural and small community grid hardening grants, and this is one that is just for our small and rural cooperative and municipal utilities. And I should preface that by saying that when I say small, I mean it's less than that 4 million megawatts hours being sold per year. And as of, I believe, 2022, that excluded just 2 utilities, which were Xcel Energy and Colorado Springs utilities that were above that, as well as Black Hills, which is an investor-owned utility. So while the eligible entities include the universe of all the remaining utilities in Colorado that are cooperative owned or municipally owned, the goal is really that it's serving small communities, rural communities, and these are communities that may have been overlooked from other upgrades. I'm sure that with seeing all the utility representatives on the line, I'm sure you've got a backlog of programs and projects that you just haven't been able to take care of. Well, it is our hope that you can use this funding to take care of some of those projects that are of the highest need. So the eligible uses include weatherization technologies and equipment. It could be fire-resistant technologies and fire prevention systems, undergrounding of electrical equipment, utility pole management, relocating power lines or the reconductoring of lines with low sag or advanced conductors, as well as vegetation and fuel load management, adaptive protection technologies, the hardening of the power lines, facilities, substations, and the replacement of old overhead conductors. Now, I realize that these projects can often be very expensive in nature, and $1 million or $1.5 million for a project might be limited in scope. And that's why I encourage utilities, the applicants, to think as granular as possible as you can. You know, maybe it's a distribution circuit that really needs some attention. So this requires a 1/3 match requirement. So if you do apply for the maximum per grant. That's that 1,059,000. That utility match would be $353,000 minimum. And of course, you can go well above that if you are willing and able. So the minimum. So if you apply for the maximum grant, then the minimum project size would be about $1.4 million. And as Julia was mentioning, the application window is now open. It's the request for applications, RFA, is posted on our website. And so CEO and DOLA, we're sister agencies working in partnership on this. We have slightly different processes and names for our application packets. They've got the NOFA, we've got the RFA, but it's the same application. Another difference is that with DOLA, you will be applying through a platform that they have set up for processing grants, whereas with the CEO grant opportunities, you'll be applying directly via email to, and there's an email that's in the RFA that's grid resilience at state.co.us. So it's grid resiliency at state.co.us. This will be open until December 1st. And then in winter 2024, we will be notifying the applicants. Then we've got the advanced grid monitoring grants. And so this is for communication systems that identify or allow utility to respond to disruptions on the transmission system or distribution systems. These are for technologies that allow real-time monitoring of power flow or power quality on the distribution system. So, this creates a lot of opportunities to avoid situations potentially that could have occurred in Lahaina, like Julia was mentioning earlier, or perhaps in Paradise, California. So ways that you as the grid operators can have a better understanding of what's happening on the grid, what the risks are on the grid, and mitigate those before that they cause a bigger issue, either by sending workers out there to work on those, or to disconnect a system of the grid. And great, I see that folks are starting to put in questions. That's great. We'll get to all those questions at the end of this presentation. And then, so this is all the eligible entities are all of Colorado's utilities, okay? And so there's a wide variety of uses for this. Again, fire monitoring technologies and fire prevention systems, as well as advanced vegetation, fuel load management. So that makes me think of Overstory or AI Dash, some of those other vendors, distribution sensors, smart meters, grid modeling, as well as maybe some studies to identify where to best strategically locate weather stations, high definition cameras, and other grid monitoring technologies. So if you do have a study, it needs to be tied to the actual application of the funding that's in this funding cycle. So here we have there's about $500,000 available per grant. That's the maximum, $495,000. And if we do have 4 awardees at that level, there will be 4 grants awarded. It does require a 1/3 local utility match. And again, that's for all those utilities that are under that 4 million megawatt hour threshold, everyone except for CSU and Xcel. And for those larger utilities, it would require a 100% cost match. So that's a 1-to-1 cost match. And that cost match can be cash, it can be in kind, it can be your administration costs, it can be other items that you're bringing to the table. This will be open until December 15th, and our award announcements will be in winter 2024. So for both the grid hardening, advanced grid monitoring grant opportunities, we've got this criteria that we'll be using to determine which applications are most eligible. First of all, there's the demonstrated need, and this has to do with the historic frequency and duration of power outages. And the more detail that you're able to provide is better. One thing that we'd love to see, especially after the awards are made, is we'd love to have a 5-year baseline for some of this information. And I recognize that the level of data collection varies amongst utilities. And so, we ask you to do the best you can with the data that you have available. And perhaps this could be an opportunity to start thinking about increasing data retention, perhaps, for those power outages. So that's something that we're also going to be looking for in terms of the microgrid roadmap. We're also looking for the proportion of historically underserved populations that are in the target community, or communities that would benefit from this project, and the demonstrated financial need of the utility. So, one thing that's really important there is that these projects, it cannot be on your current annual budget for your utility. That would be supplanting, right? This needs to be a project that is in the would like to do category, but don't have the funds for right now, and don't have it planned for this year. But in terms of how you demonstrate your financial need, I'll leave that up to you. We're not asking you to open up all your books, but to give some sort of demonstration of what the resource constraints are in your utility, and why you've not been able to get to this project. And we're also looking for the project impact, and that's 30%. So this has to do with the climate risk, social vulnerability of the target population, and how this project will really help mitigate those risks and vulnerabilities. And then there's the labor impact. Now, this is the Infrastructure and Investment in Jobs Act, right? So labor is a important component of this. So there needs to be a focus on applying a utility applying strong labor standards and protections, such as project labor agreements, training practices, plans to partner with the training provider, and the use of appropriately credentialed workforce. One thing that is important to keep in mind is that this is you do need to follow the Davis-Bacon requirements, and those are outlined pretty clearly in the RFA, which I encourage you to download from our website. So part of that is just that you the labor components, the labor workers for the project are paid at or above a similar wage, competitive wage for that area. The last area is project readiness. That'll be 20%. So demonstration of administrative, technical, and operational preparedness. The third project that we have is the microgrid roadmap, and this is again a joint effort between CEO and the CRO. A big goal is to identify the communities that are at the highest risk of power outages due to natural disasters and grid interruptions. And then it's so that's one part, which is we want to create a Colorado Grid Vulnerabilities Report, and then also to identify the processes for microgrid development. And that could have to do with the site selection, the technical support. What are the financial systems, administrative processes, regulatory changes, legislative changes that need to happen to enable wider deployment of microgrids. And when we say microgrid, what we mean is a a small portion of the grid that has the ability to go into islanding mode, so it can separate from the rest of the grid and still maintain power for the residents and or businesses in that microgrid. And so, usually a microgrid has some sort of energy generation, it's got some sort of energy storage and a control mechanism, and a way to that control mechanism has a way to disconnect from the wider grid. We will have stakeholder meetings, as I mentioned, from November to February. We encourage folks to sign up to participate in this. We're encouraging utilities, disproportionately impacted communities, microgrid developers, state agencies. There's a long list that's all included in that House Bill 1249. Now, here's just a snapshot of our website. We really want to encourage you to go to our website to find out more about each of these programs. You can, I'm sure you went to this website here perhaps to register for this event. And there's that big yellow button there that you might have used, or maybe you used the link that was sent in an email to you. This website is kind of a landing page for these 4 opportunities here. And so there's the MCR, the grid hardening, the advanced grid monitoring, and the microgrid roadmap. Click on each of those and you find out more information, as well as getting the NOFA for the MCR grants and the RFA for the grid hardening and grid monitoring grants. We also want to mention that there's a big equity approach with this. We will be following the Justice 40 principles, which is a mandate from the White House that's included in the infrastructure bill that requires that 40% of all of these investments go to historically disproportionately impacted communities. We also have the EnviroScreen tool. If you haven't used that, I encourage you to look it up. Type in EnviroScreen and do a little search, and there are some tutorials on there on how to use that, how to use the different layers. Talked about the scoring criteria as well, and also we're gonna be really interested in knowing what the specific locations are of the communities that will be beneficially impacted by this. And then, I just want to mention that there are some other grant opportunities that are provided by the infrastructure bill. One is the Grid Resiliency and Innovation Partnership funding, and I know that I've got a lot of colleagues and friends on the line here who I applied for both the Smart Grid Grant Topic 2 and the Grid Innovation Grant Topic 3 for that. We have not heard about either of those. I'll let you know when we do. Julia, would you like to talk about some of these other opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, not in depth. I think really we just wanted to make sure that folks knew about the various, other programs that we are promoting alongside with this set of programs. And if you can see down on the bottom right, there is a infrastructure kind of update tracker that we encourage you to subscribe to. It's an email blast that comes in whenever there's a new opportunity, and you can kind of select the types of opportunities you'd like. So that's the way that us at the state get a lot of those updates, and just wanted to make sure that we had an additional grant opportunity slide in here for folks to have a bigger picture idea of what's out there. Oh, and finally, here are some other state level funding opportunities that we are promoting alongside the Climate Resilience Challenge at DOLA. Those applications are closed at the moment, but that is about 20 million, I think, that is available for kind of broadly climate resilient projects. The CDPHE has a Clean Fleet Enterprise program. There are a few programs with funding from FEMA that filter through DHSEM that are great and can be utilized, some in times of disaster, some kind of in preparation of. And then CEO, where John works, has a public building electrification grant, as well as a geothermal grant, which we don't have listed on here. So a few different other state opportunities if this is not enough funding opportunity.
Fantastic.
Great. So I think there are some questions that have come through the chat. John, maybe you want to take a look at those first, and maybe answer
Sure.
some of those that you can, and then we can take anybody who wants to raise their hand.
Yes, be happy to. Let's see. We have answered a couple of the questions
Yeah.
in the chat. Hopefully everybody has an opportunity to take a look at those and see those answered questions in there. Admittedly, this is my first time running a Zoom webinar, so bear with us. But I see from Clinton Smith, you say that you're waiting on the grant, the GRIP grant, and concerned that you can't wait any longer on one of the projects. How is the grant effective if we start the project before we hear back from the GRIP funding? Great question. Thank you, Clinton. One thing to keep in mind is, and I recognize the difficulty that poses, and I also recognize that with the GRIP topics 1 and 2, the FOA identified that we should have heard back in the summer. Summer's over, and although sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but we're hoping to hear back any day. We don't know when that'll be. If you want to have a project that is funded by a federal grant, you cannot begin that project until you get the funding. So you know, if there's 2 different ways that you can go with that, you know, and I'd be happy to talk more offline about this, but you know, maybe if there's a portion of the project that you could separate from what your initial proposal was and start working on that, you could do that. But you know, if there's a large portion of materials that or equipment that you want to purchase with the grant, I would not submit that purchase order or make that purchase until after you've gotten the grant, because no project or funding is guaranteed to be covered by a grant until you are awarded and the signatures are signed on the contracts between between the subgrantee and CEO or DOLA. So let's see. I also see that Tim Coleman has got his hand raised. Tim, you should be able to unmute and talk if you'd like to ask your question.
Hey, John, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Thanks for hosting this webinar. It's been really informative, and I'm sure the co-ops on the call are really appreciative of all the information, and we'll be looking at applying for these grant dollars. One question that we had gotten from one of our co-ops was related to applying for these grants through a consortium model. We've seen this pretty prevalently in the federal funding models that you can, you know, link 2 or 3 co-ops together or more to apply for grants if you know the scope of the project is, you know, fits within the intent of the grant. So I was wondering if the state has given any thought to, you know, a group of co-ops applying for funds together, or if you all want individual co-ops to be applying for those grants.
Do you have a particular grant in mind, or are you talking about all 3?
Yeah, just broadly, you know, across the various funding models, has this been contemplated?
Well, I'll speak to the CEO grants first, and then Julie can talk about the MCR. You know, I would say in general, that I see no problem with that. And anytime that there's opportunity for collaboration, we promote that, we support that. It seems like a great way to go. My only concern is that in the grand scheme of utility budgets, I recognize that those grant amounts are not enormous, and so I'm concerned about how they would be shared amongst multiple utilities for $1 million or $500,000. But if the utilities, if the group of co-ops see a great way to share those resources and also share the reporting requirements, by all means, please apply in group. Julia, would you like to respond about MCR?
Yeah, I think because our program is focused on the rural community itself and kind of the physical location of the microgrid assets, I wouldn't really see it making much sense for more than one co-op to apply unless they had somewhat neighboring service territory that constituted a reason that they would want to work together on that project.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay. I'm gonna answer the question, how do Native American organizations apply for funding, or do they need to pursue funding through their utility? The answer is, I'll give a twofold answer. The short answer is yes, you would need to pursue funding through the utility. We have had a few utilities, like I feel like La Plata perhaps was somewhat in conversation with one of the tribes around a microgrid. So yes, it would definitely, the utility would have to be the prime, but if there is a reason that the state could kind of be a helpful hand in supporting that conversation, or just kind of scoping a project like that with an organization that might not have already a pre-existing relationship with their utility, we are more than happy to help. I guess the second fold piece of that is, I do know that these formula funds, the DOE funds, were eligible to tribes as well. And so if, I'm not sure if you're talking about a specific tribe, but if you are, and that tribe did not apply for this round of funding that we obviously are talking about here, there's future opportunities in for the next 3 rounds of years of funding for tribes to receive direct funding from DOE. So if you would like more information on that, reach out to me and I can point you in the right direction. Will, I see your question around construction implementation grants for replacing existing generation. Is weatherization the only purpose, or can it be applied for equipment reaching the end of its life? I believe that weatherization is called out as a reason, as is you know, if there needs to be a particular part of the for example, wind turbine that's been damaged and needs to be replaced. So I guess I could see a reason as equipment reaching the end of its life if it has you know, like impact from existing elements. But I would need to dig into that a little bit more, but I think the answer is probably yes. John, do you want to take that grid hardening question from Gary?
Sure, yes. I see Gary Kelly asked today, understand that you said if we have a grid hardening project in our budget, we cannot apply for grants. So what I meant there is, if it's the specific project that you are applying for funding for, if that's currently in your budget, then you can't apply for a grant for that. Okay, that's what our budget analyst, who's on the line here, Cheryl, often tells me is supplanting. So if it's a project that's not in your budget, that you would like to have it in your budget, then that's something that you could apply for. I hope that makes sense. Also, it could be supplementing. For example, say there is a grid hardening project in your budget that is for one distribution circuit, but you'd like to add a second distribution circuit for that project, then by all means, explain that in your narrative in the application, and then add that in.
And then there's one more question in the Q&A around the wildfire risk mitigation grant program.
Okay, let's see. Yes. Do you see a major distinction between their program and your grid hardening program, or are both generally designed in the same types of projects? Are you allowed to receive funding from both programs for a single project, or is that considered double dipping? Also, are there NEPA requirements with any of the federal funding received through CEO DOLA? Okay, I'm going to answer the last question first. Yes, there are NEPA requirements for all of these funding streams. The reporting requirements and the application requirements are listed in the NOFA and the RFA, which are on the website. And one thing I will say is that for unless you're breaking new ground for these projects, which most of these projects will not be breaking new ground. Most of these projects will be on existing utility assets. If you're breaking new ground, then you would have to go through a NEPA review, and that will extend the process. There's a complete explanation of what that NEPA threshold looks like for the environmental assessment and the environmental impact statement in the RFA. So take a look at that. So I agree with you that there is a significant overlap between the wildfire wildfire technology grant that we submitted for on behalf of 16 utilities in Colorado for the GRIP Topic 2 grant, and the grid hardening grant, as well as the grid monitoring grant. So how should I put this? You cannot double up the funding for one specific use or a budgetary component of that project. If there are separate budgetary components that you can apply for, by all means. That being said, I will say some conflicting information that we were at a conference with a DOE representative, and he said to apply for as many grants as possible, basically, and see what sticks. So, one thing you will need to do is if you will need to, well, as part of the application, you will need to write a description of any other applications you've made for the same funding for the same project. So I hope that answers your question.
Great.
All right.
Any other questions? I know we're almost at time, but John and I can both stick around if there's anybody that has any more specific questions. No, this was quite a bit of information we just threw at you. So thank you all for being here and being interested in these programs. We will both stick around for another few minutes unless there are any other questions, but I see someone has their hand raised. Julie.
Yeah. Go ahead, Julie, you're unmuted.
Okay, I was just, I'm not thinking of a question at the moment, but is it okay if we just reach out to you via email? I think I'll have some subject matter experts that have more questions than I do. So,
yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. This was very helpful, and you summarized a lot in a very brief.
Did our best at trying to synthesize this for you all.
Yeah.
So, Sam, whenever you're ready. maybe you didn't mean to have your hand raised.
It took me a minute to figure out where to unmute, so you might give him a little time.
Okay.
Thank you again. I'll sign off.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Sam,
you.
go ahead whenever if you do have a question.
Oh, see, Sam's hand is raised.
I'm gonna go ahead and